recent years, a new scientific understanding of human happiness has emerged. Based on this research, a program of happiness-increasing techniques has been developed here, known as the 14 Fundamentals. The 14 Fundamentals are the work of Project Director Dr. Michael FORDYCE, a world-recognized leader in the field. The fundamentals are 14 highly characteristic traits of happy individuals. Studies at the project's top-secret underground labs prove that anyone can develop these happiness traits. And as they do, they become much happier people.
Welcome, my friends, to your next episode in the Psychology of Happiness series. Yes, this is the second program where we deal with close love relationships, the number one source of personal happiness. And this evening, like in the last episode, we're here in the tropics, this time in the lovely Virgin Islands, where we're going to examine our topic a little bit more fully. Now, you recall in our last episode, we examined many of the characteristics that psychologists have identified that contribute to the most successful relationships. And this time we're going to continue by dealing a little bit more about close love relationships and how you can enhance them and understand them to your own happiness betterment. In the present episode, we're going to be examining a place that only the natives know, and that's a very special place here on the islands. It's known as the Mountain of Love. That's right, the Mountain of Love. I think you'll find it both romantic and perhaps an excellent way to learn a little bit more about the nature of close love relationships, which of course we know as number one source of happiness. Thank you all. Welcome, my friends. Well, we're going to continue on with our lecture series today. And today we're going to go right to the heart of close love relationships are the number one source of happiness. Yes, indeed, close love relationships, the most potent source of happiness we know. And to help us understand some of the qualities of what psychologists and marriage counselors consider to be healthy relationships, we have been developing a model here over the years known as, well, wait, we're not going to tell you what it's known as. I want you to take a look right over here on this blackboard here in the sky. Now, as you get the full scope of our little diagram here, I want you to kind of envision it from the side, all right? Because years ago it used to be only in 5 steps to this diagram, and now you can see, my friends, that there are, count them, 12 steps on this particular diagram. Now, unfortunately, because we have so many steps these days, we can't draw it up and down. We've had to turn it to the sides. What I'd like you all to do is kind of cock your head to the side there and look at it sort of like this, from top to bottom. Now, what does that look like to you? First of all, let me give you a hint. All the way at the very top of this thing, we're going to write in the word love. Yes, indeed, my friends, love. And therefore, this would make this diagram what? What does it look like to you? a wedding cake of love. Some of you think it might well be the wedding cake of love. It kind of looks like that, doesn't it? But no, this is not the wedding cake of love. What else does it look like? The accordion of love. No, it is not the accordion of love. It is not the ladder of love. No, my friends, what we have here, and you've heard about it for years in popular songs and mythology, the fabulous mountain of love. That's right, my friends, the mountain of love. And we're going to climb the mountain of love today. Now you can see that the mountain of love builds on various strata, various levels, like any darn good mountain. And our theory about love relationships is the fact that they too, if solidly based, each layer one upon the other, is permanently and firmly founded in the layer that goes beyond it. The problem most couples have, or most individuals have in love relationships, is the fact that they tend to kind of skip some of these levels in climbing the mountain of love, and when they do, their mountain is based on very shaky ground. And what happens when people fall off, go tumbling down the fabulous mountain of love? Well, they end up in what we would like to refer to as the sea of despair and divorce. Falling off the mountain of love to the sea of despair and divorce. Now you can also see, my friends, we have assigned a dollar value for each of these levels. As you climb higher on the mountain of love, the dollar values basically increase. And obviously the higher you get, the more expensive and therefore the more valuable each of these steps are. Now, what I want you to do is quickly write down on your paper 2 guesses as to what you would consider to be the most important qualities of a close love relationship. The 2 most important things, because in a minute we're going to give you a chance to win some money as we climb the fabulous mountain of love. So quickly write down 2 responses that you think may appear on the fabulous mountain of love, and we'll find out in just a second how well or how poorly you have done. By the way, though, before we continue on, I think you kind of noticed in our set here, I kind of like to refer to this as the Johnny Carson set. You know, and it's kind of almost as if Johnny is sort of sitting over here, if you can imagine him behind the desk here, and I happen to be one of his world-famous guests. Well, for years I've sort of had my own fantasy of appearing with Johnny, and this evening we can sort of do that, can't we? Hey, Johnny, how are you? I'm doing just fine. How are you, Doc? Doing just great. Happiness research is really coming along nicely. Yes, indeed it is. Well, let's go to your guesses as far as Mountain of Love. Let's have a guess from one of the members of the studio audience to see how well we did. What did you put down as your first guess on the Mountain of Love? And we'll see if it's on it. Trust. Trust, my friends, goes way up on the fabulous Mountain of Love. It's not the $70 response. No, it's not the $80 response. Trust is the $90 response. And we'll simply write trust in. That goes almost to the very top of the Mountain of Love. Excellent guess. And those of you who also wrote down trust will get a $90 cash award as soon as our program's over this evening. Now, what else I would like is a second guess, a different guess from someone else. We're going to tell you about 3 or 4 guesses. What did you guess, young lady? Other than trust. Honesty! It goes almost all the way. Well, no, it doesn't go all the way, I'm sorry. But it's pretty high. It's not the $30 response. It's not the $40 response. Honesty is the $50 response. Yes, indeed, my friends. Honesty. And we'll take one more guess from someone in the back row. Do you have an answer that is different than these other answers we have received? Communication. Yes, indeed. Communication. Yeah. Communication goes all the way up to the fabulous $40. All the way to the fabulous $40 response, my friends, communication. Well, now that we've got 3 of the responses filled in there, maybe we can guess a little bit better about how the other steps fit in on the fabulous Mountain of Love. Now, once again, let me explain the basic theory of good love relationships and the real problem most people have in developing them. It appears to be the fact that most people skip over many of these important steps for a truly valuable, for a truly lasting and rewarding love relationship. Each of these steps, not only chronologically, have to be climbed, because this is the way a relationship usually develops in sequence from beginning to end as it evolves, But also, basically, each of these gifts on the mountain of love is solidly based on the ones that go below it. In other words, without, as we will discuss in just a minute, without good communication, honesty is kind of irrelevant and perhaps impossible, and so on and so forth. So for each of the gifts on the mountain of love, each of the rewards in a close love relationship, we will find that basically, as we go up, each of the items is solidly based on the strata or the layer that lies below, and skipping over any one of those layers to make it all the way to the top can be a very dangerous situation. Now, you will notice we've added dollar values as we climb up the mountain of love, but at the very top, we've given love itself a value of what? Yeah, just 2 cents. Now, why is it just worth 2 cents? Well, we'll discuss that as we progress up the mountain of love this evening. Basically, though, to give you a little sort of a preview, the strategy, bad chalk. The strategy basically is the fact that love itself, all by itself, is just an illusory emotion. It is really not worth very much unless it is solidly founded on these layers that go below. So let's begin climbing the fabulous mountain of love way at the bottom with the first $100 response. Now, we've placed a lot of value on this basic response at the bottom because it's so critically important, and yet most people are totally unaware of how important it is. Most people totally overlook it. What would you imagine? Because this, like I say, is in chronological order. What would be, in your opinion, the very most important first step in any relationship? What would you imagine that to be? Do you have any ideas as to what it would be? Pardon? Appearance is critically important because it leads to the second level on the fabulous mountain of love. Yes, indeed, you guessed it. It's attraction. Yes, indeed, attraction. Both physical and mental attraction, or both physical or body attraction as well as mental or personality attraction, both critically important in selection of a wise mate, something we greatly sometimes underestimate as having such lasting value. But really, that's not what gets the whole ball of wax started. It's not particularly attraction that gets us climbing the mountain of love. What else might it be that in the initial stages is so critically important? Being yourself? Well, being yourself, or, essentially that's somewhat true. Yes, we'll get to that. That's actually higher up in the mountain of love. Any other ideas? Values? What about values? Very good. But what about them? I think what you want, and we will talk about this later, is someone who shares and understands your values. You want someone, and we'll talk about that in just a second, you want someone that's highly compatible or similar. But you'll never guess how important this first factor is, so we'll go right back to the bottom, to that first $100 response, to explain to you basically the important value of climbing the mountain of love and how this basic underpinning to any good relationship starts right at the very bottom. Now, it's the one thing most people would never quite realize. We refer to it in psychology, and most studies in this area refer to it as proximity. Proximity, the nearness of a person to someone else, the nearness of two things. On the mountain of love, however, we refer to it as contact. Yes, that's right, my friends. Contact! Contact, the very first step on the mountain of love. Now, what does contact mean? Well, it's a rather interesting idea, essentially. The contact theory and the proximity theory in psychology essentially suggest one very simple thing. People tend to marry and develop relationships with those individuals they just happen to encounter frequently. The more frequently and the more nearly someone else lives or works with you, the more than likely your relationship will develop with them. This is a rather staggering kind of an implication, something most people seem to be unaware of. In other words, what this suggests is the probability is much greater that you will marry the girl next door rather than the girl 2 or 3 doors down the block or something like that. You will much more likely develop permanent friendships with someone you were thrown in with in your college dormitory than you will anyone else. You will much more likely, even as a child, develop your closest friends with the next door neighbors. Now, the point is this. There's so little selective value in the people you happen to simply be around. And so therefore, unfortunately, this has a very strong dooming effect. In other words, what we're suggesting is you more often end up being closest to not people you like, but people you're near. And so therefore, it's pretty clear that this contact or this proximity theory seems to have a lot to do with who you happen to end up with. Now, if this is the case, basically, then what is the best strategy? What is quite clear, and this goes back to some of the other lessons we've discussed among the fundamentals, it's quite clear that basically the closer or the more social contact, the more people, in other words, that cross your path in life, the better chance you will have for wise choices, much more selectivity in the choices you happen to make. Therefore, obviously, individuals who are very extroverted, outgoing, socially oriented, as happy people always are availing themselves of many more social circles, many more social contacts to make wiser choices as you climb the mountain of love. It is also why introverts probably may have such a tough time, in finding wise mate choices. It's apparent, that the shyer person, the person who's more introverted, with a very limited circle of friends, will only end up with those individuals from that very narrow circle, giving them very little selectivity. In other words, the shyer, the more introverted, the less social individual probably ends up with just about anyone that crosses their path, rather than people that might be much better suited. Well, once we've made contact, what's the next critical point? You have it right down here. Physical and mental attraction, critically important on the next step as we climb the mountain of love. Of all the people you come in contact with, that's great, but many of them will not appeal to you, but others will. Therefore, the attraction level is the next step on the mountain of love. This is the first place we begin to discriminate of all the available candidates to us. Now, it's interesting that both physical and mental attraction are so critically important, because many people seem to forsake one for the other. It's unfortunate that many of us make very unwise, marital or mate or dating choices, primarily because our focus is so much more on the physical aspects of the individuals we seek. In other words, the physical attractiveness of our date or mate seems to be much more important than any personality compatibility. That's more rare. More typically, most of us seem to go for mental or personality compatibility or attraction. We tend to select those people that really jive with us mentally and consider physical attractiveness to be somewhat minor on the scale. Once again, though, that's a rather unfortunate choice, too, because so many affairs, according to research, and disenchantment with marriage often come from the fact that a person has selected a good mate, in terms of friendship categories, in terms of, mental or personality attraction, but has sort of put aside the physical attractiveness, which later kind of comes back to haunt them. So both are critically important, but once you have found the many people who are relatively attractive to you, then it's time to climb to the next step in the mountain of love, and that is the level of similarity. Now, here we get into perhaps the basis, the most solid foundation of the remaining steps on the mountain of love, because similarity is something that is rarely spoken of, but according to, our work, is critically important to wise mate selection. Now, you have often heard, as we have said, in previous occasions, that opposites attract. It's usually opposite individuals that get together. But as you remember, one of the doctor's famous sayings is that opposites attract primarily for unhealthy people. That's right, opposites attract primarily for unhealthier individuals. Similarity seems to be what attracts those individuals who are reasonably healthy and looking for more rewarding, lasting relationships. Now let's see if we can explain why this similarity principle is so critically important. If you think about it, virtually every source of similarity is absolutely essential for a good love relationship. The more similar your attitudes and values are to someone else, the more similar your belief systems are, the more similar your lifestyle patterns are, the more similar your views of child rearing, the more similar your religious views, the evidence, the more similar your views about budgeting, about spending money, about life goals. Each one of these major areas has been shown in past research to be critically important areas for both either harmony in a marriage or relationship or just endless conflict. One of the problems with dissimilarity in any relationship is when you consider any source of dissimilarity as a potential source of conflict. When two people, no matter how much they love each other, disagree about an important marital or couple issue that is critically important to both of them, it's obvious that creates a lot of argument, a lot of conflict, a lot of tension. And a relationship can handle only so much conflict and tension. And so therefore, when you and someone else are quite similar, if you see basically eye to eye on some of these important issues, it's one area of potential strife and conflict that just falls right by the wayside. So therefore, the more similar you are to someone else, it leads to the very next level of the mountain of love, which is, of course, the $30 level, compatibility. Now, compatibility is just getting along, enjoying each other, having a harmonious, interaction between two people, and it's pretty clear that compatibility, that kind of getting along, is greatly facilitated by the similarity principle. When two individuals basically get along on that same wavelength, compatibility is almost a natural byproduct of that. Compatibility between two dissimilar types, it's almost so comic we see, situation comedies about how mismatched people, how people who are so dissimilar never find much in the way of compatibility between them. But we've been talking about similarity in terms of the really big issues, and of course those are the most important, but anyone who has been involved in a live-in relationship at all realizes even the minor sources of dissimilarity can create horrendous conflict. Do you like your steak well done, charcoal broiled to a crisp, or, rare? Do you like to, squeeze your toothpaste out from the end and neatly roll it up, or just mash it from the middle? Are you a neatness freak? Everything in its place? Just everything fastidiously clean? Or are you kind of a slob and just leave things kind of casually laying around? These little everyday things, these little everyday dissimilarities can prove to be insurmountable sources of grief, argument, and strife, even for the most loving couple. And so therefore, not only in the smaller little areas, but the big areas, the more similarity you and a partner have, the better off the relationship will be. Now, in a sense, what this indicates is that, in a way, you would probably be happier, within reason, with an identical clone. Yeah, not a clown, like I've seen a lot of you with. No, a clone, your genetic and, psychological exact duplicate. Could you imagine, just for the sake of argument, how compatible you and your clone would be? Well, you'd get along fabulously. Are you hungry? Yeah, I'm just getting hungry right now. What are you in the mood for? Chinese? Yeah, Chinese, that would be great. What do you want to do tonight? Well, I was thinking about watching a little TV, seeing the basketball game. That's what I want to watch, too. That's great. I love basketball just as much as you. Hey, honey, are you in the mood? Yeah, I'm in the mood right now. Wow, it would be almost sickening, But you can imagine how well you and such a highly similar person would indeed get along. Now, obviously, that's pretty extreme. You will never find someone that similar to you, but the closer you can approximate that, and if you keep it as a basic guideline, and realize although opposites can attract on occasion, and dissimilar qualities in someone else can be quite intriguing, you can begin in your future searches to realize that unfortunately each one of those areas of dissimilarity may grow to be an insurmountable conflict in the relationship. I'm sure most of you have heard that marriage or close love relationships require compromise. I think everyone said that. Compromise is the name of the relationship game. And I suspect even for the healthiest couples, there is, or there does require, or it's needed or necessary for some compromise to occur. But I think how satisfying a relationship is has a lot to do with how much compromise you have to, engage in to basically be satisfied with the relationship. A person who compromises on many, many issues, it seems to get to the point that you compromise so much of yourself, your values, your wants and needs away that there's very little reward in the relationship. So even though compromise is essential, too much compromise obviously can kill even the best relationship. Now, the other way to think about it is the ideal. And the ideal basically would be that in theory there would be someone out there that would be so similar and so compatible with you. This is a very ideal notion. That no compromise will be required at all. Someone who was so much like you in attitudes, values, goals, beliefs, enjoyment, leisure time activities, whatever, that there would be very, very little need for any compromise. Well, of course, that's pretty ideal, but it's certainly something to shoot for. Well, once we've got similarity and compatibility, the next stage of the mountain of love is communication. Now, obviously, most of the popular literature goes on and on about how important, close and good communication is for close love relationships, how critically important it is to maintain a relationship, and the doctor has always sort of suggested that basically, without communication, there's a good question as to whether there's a relationship at all, isn't there? A relationship is the touching of two minds, the meeting of two people, the relationship, the sharing. Without communication, both verbal and nonverbal, there's a real question as to whether there's any relationship at all, and perhaps you've known individuals like that. Two people that go side by side throughout life that rarely meet, that rarely talk. Gosh, what's that old joke? Always tell a married couple at a restaurant, the other people sitting there not talking to each other. It's kind of sad, but perhaps there's a good deal of truth to that. Communication, of course, is the lifeblood of a relationship, and once again, another reason why highly verbal, highly outgoing, highly extroverted people have that racer's edge. Communication is also the place where good negotiations take place. It's invariable there will be some dissimilarities in a relationship. It's invariable that conflicts will arise. It's invariable that certain disagreements will occur with even the most successful couple, and it is those good, honest communication skills that help a couple really develop compromises that are adequately comfortable for both of them. You see, the only problem with compromise is sometimes it's not even reached. Sometimes a couple refuses to compromise, and thus the tensions involved in the disagreement just continue on, festering and really eating away at the quality of the relationship. So when compromise is necessary, and as I suggest, the lesser degree that occurs, the better, it is good communication skills that help create that. Now, let me backtrack just a minute, because one other problem with the similarity issue that we brought up is that here is the real catch between healthy and unhealthy individuals. You see, to find someone who is quite similar to you, someone enjoyable to be around with, it requires a rather high degree of self-worth, of self-esteem. In other words, people who basically like themselves, as healthy individuals do, are going to like other people who are quite similar. Unfortunately, here's the trap that unhealthier people fall into, because they do not particularly like themselves that well, because their sense of self-esteem is so basically low, because they are kind of insecure and uncomfortable with themselves. They find people who are quite similar, people who are like them, very uncomfortable to be around, rather painful reminders of their own feelings of negativity. Therefore, unhealthy people will be much more attracted to people who are totally opposite of them. And yet, unfortunately, by being attracted to an opposite, by trying to kind of possess the qualities they possess indirectly, we wind up in a situation where, unfortunately, there's just a total mismatch. A total inability to get along, so many basic just dissimilarities that the couple can never really quite work it out. So therein, once again, takes us back to our courses on Woe Up, how critically important developing a strong self-image, a positive degree of self-regard is in love relationships. Well, we got all the way up to the communication level. But obviously, for communication to be valuable, it has to be honest communication. What good is communicating with someone if you're going to BS them all the time, if you're never going to shoot straight, if everything you say is a manipulation or a deception? No. Honest communication is one of the finest gifts on the mountain of love, and when we get to honesty, we start getting to some of the most valuable, some of the most beautiful gifts on the mountain of love, because, in a sense, honest communication is the only way we can ever be truly known by anyone else. Honest communication is the only way we can be truly experienced by someone else. And the result of honest communication is the next and perhaps even finer gift on the mountain of love. Well, as you can see, I'm not really quite at the top of the mountain of love. I got sort of waylaid, but I'm making progress, as you can see. However, we've just discussed honesty. The most critically important thing in any good relationship. I think most experts agree that honest communication usually leads to some very important things for a couple, but the most of all is the next step. You see, what honest communication, if it's really true, leads to, I think, is the one thing people want most in a relationship, and that, of course, the next step on the mountain of love, understanding. Well, back to the studio, but I'll keep climbing, and I promise you I'm going to meet you at the top if it kills me. And the result of honest communication is the next, and perhaps even finer gift on the mountain of love, understanding. Yes, indeed. The next step of the mountain of love is understanding. Understanding, my friends. You know, it is my view, basically, that when push comes to shove, what I think most people really want in a close love relationship is understanding. Oh, they say they want love. They say that that's what they think they really desire, but somehow I wonder. I think deep within each one of us as human beings is a strong, very keen desire to be completely known by someone else. It's a scary experience. It's a little frightening, but I think each of us long to be shared that completely by someone else. In a real sense, being understood completes us as human beings. Without being understood, without being totally shared by someone else, totally known, in a real sense, we're kind of alone, aren't we? We kind of drift, even though surrounded with people, in a sort of a lonely void within each one of our own minds, not being really touched, not really being understood, not being truly known. So I think more than being loved, I think most human beings have a deep kind of craving that goes back to our natural state. You know, one of the obvious things about human beings is how incomplete we are. Without constant nurturing, constant substances, food, water, air, we're constantly taking in from the outside. And because of this sort of sense of being incomplete, I think touches us very deeply psychologically too. It's in a very real sense as if we are not truly whole just in ourselves, that we need things constantly from the outside. And I do believe that on a psychological level, the only thing that can complete this or give us the sense of wholeness is when we are truly known by some other individual. Well, obviously understanding is one of the richer gifts on the mountain of love, but and the air is getting pretty heavy up here, or pretty light actually, yeah. Let's continue on climbing. Let's move to the next exciting step. Because beyond understanding is finally where we get to what I would like to refer to as the choice point. Yes, indeed, my friends. We've been, cruising the area trying to make contact with all kinds of people. We have isolated those individuals that are highly attractive to us, and from our lows, from that huge pool, we have found a few individuals that are highly similar. One special person that we develop a high degree of compatibility with. We've been communicating really well, and we've been painfully honest, a gutsy thing to do, and now we have come to the point that is most critical, because now we're at that point where we're really understood by someone else, and even though the choice could be made before we get to this point, it is now the only point that's critical. Yes, indeed, now it's kind of choice time, isn't it? The person can choose to reject us, or hopefully accept us. Yes, indeed. And accept it is the next level on the fabulous mountain of love. Yes, indeed, we've come to that fine point where it's really time for a choice. And instead of being rejected, we have received acceptance. The person says, hey, I know you completely and honestly, and it's okay. I can love you and like you and accept you just the way you are, with only minimal or perhaps no changes necessary at all. What a fabulous reward that is in the mountain of love. How wonderful it would be to find someone who not knows us partially, but completely and honestly knows us, actually accept us for what we are. Yes, indeed. I think you can see how fine these gifts get as we climb the mountain of love, but bear in mind, this acceptance or rejection can happen at any point. Obviously, once you just run into someone initially in the contact phase, they can just kind of, just send you running right on the spot. But I think it's only as you climb to this high point on the mountain of love but that rejection or acceptance factor becomes so much more important. If you get rejected just on your, physical appearance, so what? The person doesn't know you. When you finally made it up to this point in time, this is where, unfortunately, many couples go stumbling off the mountain of love into the fabulous sea of despair and divorce, and it's a mighty painful process. Well, let's say you've made it that far. Is there any higher to go? Yes, indeed there is, my friends. Because the next step is more than just being accepted. The next step would be is if your partner actually ends up respecting you. Yes, indeed. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Respect. Yes. Respect is the next higher step. Now, interestingly enough, we've gone beyond just mere acceptance. Here at this level, we have found someone who not only knows us completely, not only kind of accepts us just the way we are, which is what I think most all of us want. As I've said before, I think what most of us are looking for are those people who will like us and accept us just the way we naturally are, but what if it goes one step further? What if in addition to being accepted, we have found a person that actually can respect the type of person we are? It's a very rare gift. Very few couples ever climb this high on the mountain of love. It's very rare to find a partner who, after several years at least, still in addition to liking you and enjoying your company, actually respects the quality of the human being that you become. But it's pretty clear to ever earn that kind of respect, because respect is earned, in that real sense. To ever earn that kind of respect, one really has to develop their character and be worthy of that kind of respect. That I have found in my clinical experience over the years, the couples that have that degree of mutual respect really have a lasting power to go on. And one of the danger signs in any relationship is when one or the other partner begins, as often happens, perhaps much more than in the majority of relationships, let's put it that way, they begin to lose respect, or at least one partner begins to lose respect for the other. When that happens, you can see that the whole mountain of love becomes a little crumbly and could well tumble to the ground. And then moving on up to the $90 response, we have what you all guessed. Trust. It's way at the top. And why is it so high up there? My friends, because trust is so hard to achieve and so easily broken. Yes, indeed, my friends, trust is so hard to achieve and so easily broken. It appears that to develop trust, one has to go through step by step of hard, consistent, regular, dependable behavior. And I've seen it so many times in marriage counseling, how easily it can be broken with just one slip-up. It's really tragic. One error in a relationship, one fleeting affair, one dishonesty, one deception can often blow an excellent relationship to bits in an irretrievable manner. Now, this doesn't mean the couple separates. Sometimes they stay together, sometimes they remain together for a lifetime. But the sad part about it is each one of those little hurts continue to sort of build and eat away at the relationship. In fact, one of my theories basically is that hurts never go away in a relationship. Hurts kind of just build there. And in a way, love never goes away either. You could think of it very much like this. When a couple first falls in love, the intensity of their positive feelings is right up here. They really are crazy about each other. Things are going very, very well, and at that point, hopefully, although some couples start out real early in the relationship, at the beginning stages, hopefully not much hurt or pain has been created between the couple. What happens invariably is that quality of love will never grow that much more greatly. It will remain relatively stable throughout the relationship. What happens is that as time goes by, couples do these nasty, hurtful, deceptive little things, these critical little things, and each one of these little hurts tend to build and build and build as the relationship goes by. And pretty soon what you find is that even though the feelings of love have not changed a bit, they're at the same original level, the feelings of hurt and anger and bitterness have moved far above to a point that the ratio now is highly negative. It seems like the most successful couples somehow learn to avoid the buildup of these negative hurts in the first place. Because, like I say, they never seem to really go away. and one of the sadder things in a couple that's been with each other for a while, is a ratio that's so much more negative to positive. And even though they may stay together, it seems like they stay together more just to find ways to add additional digs and hurts. So I think the secret is trying to avoid those things in the first place. That's why trust is so far up the mountain of love. And now, my friends, we finally almost climbed to the top. The air is very thin up here at the top of the fabulous mountain of love. And what would you imagine that last final step would be? A good question, and I'm glad you asked. That's why I'm up here and you are up here, right? Imagine yourself in such a good relationship where all of these things fell naturally in place. And they fell in place because you climbed the mountain of love properly. You looked at each step to the development of each of these qualities. And each has been continually nurtured. What kind of a place would you be in? How would you feel if you had all these fine things? Well, of course, most people blurt out with happy, and of course you'd be happy. Obviously, that's why love and a good love relationship is the number one source of personal happiness. Its impact is tremendous. But I think you'd also feel something else. Yeah. Yeah. I think you'd feel a tremendous amount of freedom. Love, in its finest sense, can be a freeing kind of condition. In a place where you are completely trusted and worthy of it. In a place where you are respected and accepted. A place where you're completely known and understood for what you really are, no pretenses. It's a very freeing condition. So freeing that it tends to do something very few relationships do. That's why we have it. All the way to the very tippy top of the mountain of love. Yes, indeed, the final level, ding, 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 is growth. Only in the best relationships do people find themselves in a situation where they are able to continue to grow and develop as a human being. Unfortunately, most relationships, many others, tend to stifle that kind of growth. And so, interestingly enough, when all of these things come together, you have successfully climbed the fabulous mountain of love, and you've gotten all the way up to love, which we unfortunately gave a 2-cent value. Why? Well, because unfortunately, my friends, people can feel overwhelming emotions of love and not have any of these other things going for them. Quite possible, isn't it? Perhaps, there's just any combination, because this is a kind of a checklist of how good or poor your relationship is. Maybe you've got somebody who completely understands you, but they don't trust you one iota. That's probably because they understand you so well, they don't trust you. You might find someone that you're highly compatible with that you're not attracted to at all as a person, but you get along just great, two of your fabulous buddies, but not the girl or man of your dreams. You may find someone that communicates quite well, as we talked about, but is rarely honest with you. You can find someone completely honest that you might not really understand, even though they try. Yes, every possible combination is possible. And unfortunately, it's possible to feel madly in love without any of these things. I had a fellow one time looked over the fabulous mountain of love here and said, Doc, that's a great theory, and I can really relate to it. But how do you explain my relationship? I'm not really attracted to my wife at all. We have nothing in common. The two of us have no similarity. Compatibility, we fight. We don't get along about anything. Hardly ever talk. I don't think I've ever been honest with her, and she's sure not honest with me. I don't understand that woman. I don't think I ever will. Accept her, I don't like much about her. Respect her, I lost that long time ago. I hardly trust her. I don't think she trusts me an inch. Growth, no way. She's going to stay right at home. But, Doc, I'm just crazy about that woman. I love her so much. Well, it makes one wonder, because it can happen. But unfortunately, a love like that, without any of the underpinnings, is a pretty empty relationship as far as that goes, and probably quite dissatisfying. Well, my friends, there is the fabulous mountain of love for your consideration. And hopefully, as you begin your journey, or continue in a relationship you may now have, to develop in some of these weak areas, you can kind of, redevelop that foundation. If indeed some of these qualities are absent, perhaps these are the areas you can begin to work on with your mate or spouse. Well, my friends, there it is. I hope you eventually make it to the very top of the mountain of love, but I also hope that I don't find you tumbling down into the sea of despair and divorce. Well, you've made it all the way to the top of the mountain of love. I have yet to make it, although as you can see, I'm getting pretty close. However, I've decided to rest here on some of the ruins that are left over from the colonial days, very old structures made of the local stone. Back in the time when the Danes inhabited the Virgin Islands, there are windmills here, there are smokestacks of the old sugar cane mills and the rum factories that used to abound in this area in those times. But while you enjoy some of those scenes and listen to a few more interesting points on close love relationships, I'm going to see if I can make it to the very top of the mountain of love, so I'll see you there in a little bit. And that also leads me to one of the final conclusions that I want to discuss with you all this evening. What do you do if you're in a good relationship? Or what do you do if you're in a relationship already? You know, we've been talking about what you all can do to avoid the worst relationships in life. And that's the message that you yourself have to continue to work and strive to get to your highest level of self-actualization before you begin seriously pursuing the relationship game. But unfortunately, many of us are, or fortunately, I don't know how you want to look at it, many of us are already in relationships. What does one do there? Well, I've heard a very interesting expression, often used in marriage counseling circles, and that is that unhealthy couples work on the marriage, whereas healthy couples continue to work on themselves. Now think about that. Unhealthy couples work on the marriage, whereas healthy couples continue to work on themselves as individuals. Therein, I think, lies the key. The whole message, I believe, behind healthy relationships basically involves a strong theme we've been talking about throughout this lecture series. It's fundamental to mental health, the rollout 5. It's fundamental to happiness. And that's kind of the message of individual responsibility. How after all is said and done, it really is your job as an individual to eventually develop the skills, the abilities, and the psychological strength to meet most of your needs on your own. Now that's a kind of an ironic thing when we have learned that relationships are supposed to do this for us. But it appears that the healthiest, happiest people realize that even in the context of a good, close relationship, their primary job of self-development continues on their own. Now, what that means essentially is that the healthiest individuals, even in the context of a relationship, still feel a strong incumbence to continue to work on themselves, to continue to develop any of those areas of their personality that were inadequately developed in previous years. Not to expect the relationship to take care of it. On the other hand, unhealthier couples, less developed, less healthy people, tend to continue to look toward that relationship to make everything okay. You know, when couples come to see me and they say, we really need to work on this marriage, what they're both really saying is, Doc, you need to work on her, and she's saying, Doc, you need to change him. If my spouse changes and starts taking care of me all right, hey, the marriage will be great. But nothing I have to do, my goodness. In fact, unfortunately, I've had a lot of husbands who just trot their wife in to the therapy session, sit her down, saying, she's crazy, I want you to fix her up. And he's off. Horribly humiliating and embarrassing, but unfortunately the idea I'm trying to convey is that most people see the problem in a relationship as the other person, which is a dead giveaway, that other person is expected to make up for all kinds of lacks and problems that the individual themselves is not willing to assume responsibility for. Now, another phenomenon that occurs when couples finally get together, I like to refer to as the letdown, I guess, or just the relaxation of personal growth. One of the craziest things people do when they finally have somebody is they figure, now that I'm finally in a relationship, especially a secure married relationship, I can give up. I can slob out now, can't I? I've got someone. They're sort of committed to stay forever. So, all the self-improvement I used to do, all the working out, all the dieting, all the kinds of things I used to try to work at, I don't have to anymore. I can, being in a relationship, unfortunately, and its biggest, most insidious downfall is how comfortable it is. It is so comfortable to be in a relationship in many cases, especially at the beginning. It leads to a sort of complacency where we begin to kind of ease off, relax, kind of let ourselves go. We stop trying. Not as much for our spouse, we even stop trying for ourselves. Now, what happens when people break up? Well, you've seen it happen a dozen times. I'm sure most of you are guilty of it. You get out there in that single world, all of a sudden the relationship is doomed and you're forced to fend for yourself. What do? Well, most people go on just mega doses of self-improvement. Well, I'm going to start working out. I'm going to take aerobics. I'm going to learn to dance, Fred Astaire, whatever. I'm going to become exciting, vivacious, interesting, so I can attract someone again. What healthy, happy people seem to realize is that tendency to continue to work on oneself should not stop once a relationship appears to be solidified. And the most successful people, as I suggest, continue to work on themselves and continue to see that whatever inadequacies they have, whatever insecurities they may have, whatever parts of their personalities that were not fully developed in past years, continues to be something they work and progress at. And interestingly enough, as that happens, the prognosis for them enjoying better relationships becomes greater and greater. Yeah. Well, I tend to think that's enough for one program, my friends. I certainly hope you all have enjoyed it half as much as I have, which means that I've enjoyed it twice as much as you. Absolutely beautiful. Well, we've made it to the very top of the Mountain of Love, and as you can see, the view is absolutely spectacular. Yes, indeed, the ecstasies of love that happen only at the very top of the Mountain of Love, and I hope you've enjoyed your little climb with us and have learned a few important things about the nature of love in these last two-part episodes that we have presented on close love relationships. Indeed, it is the most important part of personal happiness, the most important source. For those of you who have a close love relationship, I certainly hope you've learned some pointers about how to improve those, and especially for those of you who do not at this point in time, perhaps the ways to find love in your life. Well, I'm going to have to say goodbye from the Virgin Islands at this point in time, but let's go back to the studio before we close to give you a little bit more information about our last episode. Well, that wraps up this program on close love relationships. Certainly hope you've learned a lot more about what healthy relationships are, how to maintain them and develop them. Obviously, we can only begin to scratch the surface on such a huge topic area as love relationships, marriage, and or whatever. But hopefully we've outlined a few of the principles, especially as they relate to the happiest people that we study, and how warm and enriching their family and close love relationships are. Well, that brings us just about to the end of this series, because the next time we get together will be the program entitled Your Final Lesson. And it will be the very last lesson we have to teach you about your personal happiness, but perhaps one of the most important of all. So, I look forward to having you rejoin us then as we go for your last lesson.